it's not just the physical, it's the small things. It's the gaslighting. It's the feeling that you are guilty of being with your friends instead of being your partner. It's harmful when you reach the point that, oh, I'm not sure if my partner likes that, or I don't think he will allow me to do that.
Welcome to Heartbreak to Wholeness, the podcast helping you heal from the mindfuck of narcissistic relationships and move towards the secure, peaceful woman you want to become. We will explore all of the tools that you need to get through your grief, to move past those I'll be alone forever fears, and rebuild your confidence so you can move forward in healthy relationships as your full self, never to get sucked into the narcissistic spell again. I am your host, Brie Walta, relationship clarity coach and EFT certified practitioner. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode. You are about to hear from Khryzza Kelley, who is just such a sweet and wonderful soul who, like most of my guests on this podcast, has been through some shit, some relationship shit, some relation shit. And she's here to share her story about how she went from an abusive relationship to now being able to be in a healthy marriage and to experience what that feels like. And I love this episode because so many of my clients come to me with that confusion of what is a healthy relationship? What the heck am I supposed to even be looking for? So we not only cover what verbal abuse is and why it is so hard to recognize, kind of that unspoken reason around why we stay in relationships and justify away what's happening with verbal abuse. And we talk about the most vital aspects that you need in a healthy relationship. And Khryzza really talks about how she moved through the trauma responses that came as a result of her abusive relationship and was able to heal, to start dating again, and to trust herself during that process and build the skills that she needed in order to then have a healthy relationship with her now husband. So you'll get to see her journey, and I hope that this episode gives you hope if you are in that thought process right now of, I don't know what a healthy relationship is. This is as good as it's ever going to get. I need to just hold on to what's familiar. Please listen to Khryzza's message. She has so many just gems of wisdom that she drops in this episode, and I'm so excited for you to hear them. And be sure to stick around to the end because I'm going to pull a Spirit Oracle card. And this card offers you a message that you can use to stay anchored into your healing this week. Welcome to the podcast, Khryzza. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I feel honored, and it's always nice talking to you, Bree. So thank you very much.
Yeah. When we connected, we were talking and your story came up while we were talking about other things. And I was like, I think this would be so beneficial for the listeners to be able to hear about your journey. And I know this is one of the first times that you've spoken more on a public platform about the story. So how are you feeling just thinking about sharing today?
I think it takes time, right? Especially when you experience the things that we will be talking about
Yeah.
uh, in this episode. And I think with time, you can try to talk more about it without really breaking up, or talk about it in a way that it is not so emotionally charged, but also look at it with, okay, what are the lessons that I had there? Or what are the things that I should look out for next time? Or how can I protect myself or take care of myself even better the next time around? So I think it really takes time, especially in cases like this. But right now, I think I feel more, not just confident, but feel more secure that, okay, I am okay.
Yeah. You're in such a safe space here. And that brings up a really good point around sharing your story. And when I first came out about with this work, it was, very much directly around the toxic relationship that I had come out of and sharing my experience. And the like marker that I kept coming back to was, can I share this story without looking for validation or looking for healing from the person that I'm talking to or the audience that I'm talking to? And that's a really good marker for you to be able to see how much you've integrated the pain and the grief and the confusion and all of the pieces of the story. So I know you've done a lot of work around the experience. So thank you for doing that work for yourself and for everybody that you come in contact with as well.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that too. I mean, that feels validating in itself. And I think a silver lining or the good thing that came out of this is really also finding people like you, like finding people with the same experiences, because that kind of not only validates it, okay, I'm not crazy, but also kind of makes you feel like you're not alone. Because sometimes it can be an incredibly lonely journey, especially if you're surrounded with people who never experienced such a thing. And it is strange concept to them. I mean, you can't blame them, but it's really hard not to have people to be in that same pair of shoes that you are in.
Yes, yes. That is why there's a group component in my signature program where women get to be together in that healing journey and get to say, "Oh my god, you've thought that too," or "Oh my god, you've heard that from him too." Like,
Mm.
almost verbatim sometimes, these lines from these men, and it's so validating to be in a group of women who get it, and you don't have to explain it, you don't have to feel the shame or the embarrassment around whatever you're feeling or that you're missing them even though you're going through the restraining order process, like, there are so many conflicting feelings that come up during this stuff. So, yes, to have the community, and I speak about it like it's the club that you never wanted to be in, but that you're happy that you found.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And we need that. We need that level of connection with other women who have been
Mhm,
in it with us.
mhm,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story, wherever it feels appropriate to start
Yeah.
on how you got into it, what the experience was, and where the exit started happening for you.
So, well, I was in a long term relationship. It was a high school relationship until college. I think looking back, if I put it in a way that probably is fair for everybody, I would just say that probably we grew out from each other. I think that's a fair way to say it. Um, but I think because in cases where you are in a relationship, when we say abusive relationship or when we say a relationship that is not fair on both sides, try to choose my words very, very carefully here because I also want to be very sensitive. it, there's a common misconception that for me, because this is also what I believed in when I was younger, right? You will know that the only way to know that the relationship is abusive is if you were physically harmed, right?
Yes.
So, and I have experiences where I saw my parents going at it to each other, and it was not a pleasant experience at all. It was traumatic. So in my head, I'm like, okay, as long as my relationship does not reach that point, I'm okay. It's probably good,
Mhm.
and growing up too without a parent or without a pair of parents that are loving and openly, expressing their love, commitment, dedication to each other, and trust and support, I didn't have that model of what a great and healthy relationship looks like. And when you don't have that at your home, I was more susceptible of trying to figure it out myself.
Mhm.
And I can only figure it out by my relationship. So going back to this 5 year relationship, I realized looking back that it's not just the physical, it's the small things. It's the gaslighting. It's the feeling that you are guilty of being with your friends instead of being your partner. It's the feeling of doing things without your partner because you feel like you should be doing things with your partner. The feeling that the what you're doing right now should be directed towards a future with your partner. And don't get me wrong, in a healthy relationship, that's beautiful. That's okay because you're working towards a goal. But it's harmful when you reach the point that, oh, I'm not sure if my partner likes that, or I don't think he will allow me to do that.
Yeah.
And when I caught myself thinking that, I'm like, why would I even think of somebody whether somebody will allow me or not? I mean, it is still my choice, and I feel like that choice was not on the table. And it is also the experiences of when they do such things, it's okay. But when you do it, it's not okay.
Right.
And to me, I always told myself, because I was a student leader back in university since high school, I feel like I was empowered and empowering others, supporting different advocacies. And there's always this gut feeling that I think I'm not being fully myself in my relationship. One thing also that I thought when I was younger, you know the saying that when you guys have a fight, don't go to sleep until you solve that fight.
Yeah.
So, and don't get me wrong, it's not a bad advice, but it's not applicable all the times.
Right.
That's probably what I learned as in my adulthood, that there are times it takes time and that there are conversations that are better when you guys both can't sleep. But in this specific scenario, I thought that, okay, whenever we fight, I will just say sorry so that we can squash it out before we sleep. And I have been doing that, over and over and over again till I reached the point of why? Why am I doing this?
Mm.
Why am I sacrificing my wants and needs? And ultimately, the moment probably that led me to realize that, okay, this is not for me, is when I forgot what the exact argument was, but we were on a relatively shouting match at each other. And he walked out of the room, but he slammed the door really, really hard to the point that it kind of reverberated in
Oof.
the condo unit. And as I've said, when I was a kid, I said, as long as it does not reach that point, I'm good.
Yeah.
But that slamming of the door kind of reminded me of the visceral feeling that I felt when I heard my dad kicking my mom in the other room
Yeah.
and my grandpa knocking at the door and say, "Stop it, stop hurting your wife." That literally kind of made a flashback the moment the door was slammed. And the moment it got slammed, I packed up my bags, picked up my things, went to my apartment, and I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm good. It's a sunk cost fallacy, right? Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you 5 years of your life that you're just gonna continue doing it. There's a way that even though it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever, if you think it's not healthy for you or even the other person, I think there's a threshold where you can say, okay, I'm gonna bounce. I'm gonna go because it's not fair for myself. It's not fair for everybody involved. And as I've said, when it reaches the physical, where I can hear it, I can feel it, because the verbal one, I think I have a very high tolerance to it. But
Yeah.
when it resembles anything that I know could escalate to even worse, I think I was at that point, I think I was kind of brave enough to myself and say, you can start over again, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of women are in that same train of thought of if he hits me, then I know that it's abusive, right? And even in physically abusive relationships, it's hard to leave if you are being physically abused. So that's not always like the light bulb moment,
Yep.
but it is hard to recognize what's happening when you're being psychologically and mentally abused because it's this process of like slowly chipping away at your self confidence, at your sense of self, at your sense of reality
Mhm.
and how I'm interpreting what you said about the different situations of, like, not wanting to spend time with your friends or not feeling like you can be yourself is just this baseline level of fear. It's fear, you feel afraid to go spend time with your friends because you're gonna upset him. You feel afraid to be yourself because that might cause some sort of rocking of the boat or some sort of upset in him, and we find ourselves living in this fearful, anxious place by, like, default,
Mhm.
but it happens slowly. It
Yep.
happens over time with this person that you have created a bond and that you love. So there's a lot of justifications, there's a lot of turning the eye, there's a lot of not seeing the red flags because it's not so blatant in your face, which is why that experience feels so fucking confusing because
Yeah.
you're like, "How did I end up here?" You wake up 5 years later to the slammed door and you're like, "What what 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 happened?"
Exactly. And I think, Brie, another contributing factor too is that because when you talk about especially long-term relationships that ended up, being an abusive relationship, there's also a lot of factors involved. Like, for example, specifically on my experience, I remember both of our parents were very much like, supportive, but also at the same time kind of contributing. to
Mm.
the environment of, I would say, emotional abuse, because they would say, "Oh, that's okay, that's normal." But I have a gut feeling that it was not. But because I was surrounded with people that probably thought that it was okay, then it adds more to the confusing part.
Yes.
Thing is, there will always be that one person who would ask you a very innocent question, probably not even malicious. Because I remember my best friend, I was telling him about, you know, what I experienced. And I remember never did I consider the idea of breaking up until that conversation. I just thought that it's okay, it's normal, it's part of the whole thing, the whole relationship, blah, 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 blah. And then he asked me a very normal question, which is, have you considered breaking up with him? And I think that was the first moment in my life that somebody in my face asked me that question.
Yeah.
And this was 1 year before I ended up that relationship.
Yeah.
Because even if somebody asked you blatantly, as explicitly as they could,
Yeah.
till you yourself are not ready to hear it, you will never be able to leave whatever situation you're in.
Yes. Yes. Which, when you're primed in your childhood to witness relationships in one type of dynamic, that's your familiar, right?
Yeah,
So you also are battling uphill against that belief that this is the way that two people interact in relationships. Relationships involve conflict, they involve yelling, they involve struggle. And on some level we expect that because that's what we saw. That's what
yeah,
we were taught. So if you haven't been taught what a healthy relationship looks like, then it's much easier to stay into something with just the expectation that that's how it's supposed to be. And I
exactly.
know in my experience too, in my past toxic relationship, I thought the same thing. I was like, "Oh, this is just, it's supposed to be hard. We're not always going to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Fighting is just a part of relationships.
Yeah.
Yelling is just a part of relationships, even though when that would happen, everything in my body would tell me that it wasn't okay."
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is and I learned this when I am already an adult, that there is a wisdom in listening to your body. Like, because it will, it's fight or flight reaction. It's a survival instinct. And it doesn't mean like we have to hunt for boars or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of our body telling us, like, this is probably not normal, or we're not feeling really good about this. But then we override it by our emotions and say, no, 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 it's normal. I saw it a couple of times. And one thing that I realized too when you talk about fear, when you said that this is the baseline of fear, it also because we don't have an idea of what a healthy relationship looks like, and because we don't have an idea of what a secured relationship looks like, it
Yep.
makes us fearful of, like, what if I do this, I will lose him, or if I do this, he's gonna get angry at me, or if I do this, he's gonna get mad at me, or he's gonna do something in response to what I'm doing that is potentially negative.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think as I grow older, I always ask myself, because there will always still be disagreements in marriage and relationship. And I will always ask myself, like, is this really, if you guys are gonna break up today, is this really the reason?
Yes.
Is this heavy enough for you to break up? Like, it's come on.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I think the lack of security, the lack of idea, model, picture of what a healthy relationship looks like also contributes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. If your relationship is fragile enough where you being yourself or you setting a boundary threatens the foundation of that relationship, then it wasn't built in security.
Exactly.
That's a very rocky place to be trying to build a relationship when anything like the wind could come over and knock it down. And that experience is, again, if you don't know what to expect, it's so normal. I would just want to normalize for all the listeners, like, if you've not been modeled or don't know or haven't learned what a healthy relationship looks like, then it's easy to assume that any person who's choosing you, quote unquote, is a relationship that you should be in. And the way that I really define a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy relationship is a healthy relationship is where you're spending the majority of the time feeling safe, secure, loved, respected, with moments of disconnection, with moments of conflict, moments of hopelessness. But then you always return back to that safety and that love and that respect. In unhealthy relationships or toxic relationships, you're living the majority of the time in the fear and the anxiety and the hopelessness, with moments of feeling connected, moments of feeling loved, but then it always returns back to that baseline. So it's on a spectrum, just like everything. But for people listening, if you look at your relationship, like, where are you spending the majority of your time? What energy, what's the vibe of your relationship the most of the time? And that could be a really good barometer to be like, oh no, this is the person that I'm choosing to spend the majority of my time, my energy with. And I want that exchange to be based in security and safety and love. Because the way that you are recharging in your home affects how you act and how you are in your job and your other relationships and with your family and your friends. Like, it's just, that is the baseline. So if you're being drained at home all of the time because you're in that more toxic energy, then of course you're going to feel that way in all parts of your life.
Exactly. And I think a healthy relationship, it should be liberating, right? It should not be limiting. You
Yes.
should be able to be yourself and explore other facets of yourself. Because we're revolving, we're always evolving as human beings. You know, who you were in your teens is different from who you were in your 20s, on your 30s, 40s, 50s. You'll probably develop habits or hobbies that you probably would like later on in life. You'll meet new friends, you'll have a new job or whatever. And that person in a healthy relationship should be your constant, and it should be your safe space where whatever happened at work, go back to this person and it's everything's gonna be okay. Or whatever happened with your family, mother, sister, father, go back to the person and everything's okay. One thing that I always tell my husband, who I have now an amazing relationship with, everything around us evolves, changes from time to time. But this, like the two of us, should remain constant. And having that verbal agreement and say, okay, we're in this together. We'll navigate whatever change. You're gonna change your job, that's okay. You know, we're gonna move houses, that's okay. We're gonna have a cat, that's okay. Like this healthy, if you're in a healthy relationship, this is a constant and this is like an anchor of
Yeah.
whatever it is to. Um, but that's definitely, that takes time to also realize and learn for some of us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. I like the analogy of an anchor.
Yeah,
In a healthy way, it's like that grounding force, right? That can hold us while we go explore the thing, while we're trying to figure out the conflict, while we're trying to, like, navigate life. It's that secure, predictable thing that's holding us in place.
exactly.
And when we feel safe in our relationship, we can explore those other things. There are a lot of women that I've worked with that after they have gotten out of that relationship, they've gone on to start businesses. They've gone on to follow their dream. It is liberating. I love that term that you use, liberating, not limiting, because that is what a healthy relationship feels like. It's a celebration of you in all of your facets, the fun times, the not so fun times, the emotions that are good to feel, the emotions that aren't so good to feel, right? It's just like you in every aspect of who you are. It's not, we're okay if you're this one specific way that works for me.
Yeah.
What was that experience like of coming out of the unhealthy relationship and then going into this dynamic? Or was your husband the next relationship right after?
I did not have a serious relationship right after because when, first of all, the process of coming out was messy. I think that's common to all of
Yeah.
us.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
It's not like you can say to a person, okay, we're done. Okay, we're good. Bye.
Yep.
It's messy. I left that apartment. I left his place, went to my apartment. He followed me there and then begged me to come back to his place. And at that time, I said, no, I can't do it. I just cannot see myself coming back. And I'm not at that point, I was just not talking about the apartment, but I was talking about the relationship. Because I felt like, even though, as what you said, the slamming of the door might not be a light bulb moment for a lot of us, but to me that was. So it was like, you cannot do that to me. It was me trying to figure out how to not give my consent to be treated like that. Because I felt like for years and years, I have given you consent to do anything, even if sometimes or most of the time it's to my detriment, my emotional detriment. And when I said I'm not coming back, we still met a couple of times after because, the insistence that we can still fix this, I'm going to change, blah, 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 blah. But I don't want to go back. When you're in a long term relationship, there's a lot of habits that you form, right? Like you eat together, you do things together, you live together. Um, but at that time, I remember I consciously did not do the things that we were used to do, like eating together or staying in one place together. I literally pulled myself out of that situation in the only way that I know how. And I think one of the things, and probably a lot of our fellow women who experience this could relate to, one thing that reminded me that what made it difficult for me was the finances. Our finances were intertwined.
Mhm.
And I think I remember at that time I was in between jobs. So I was like, dang. And my family is living hours from where we were. And I was like, oh my God, like I I wanna leave. I wanna be on my own. But our finances are intact. The things that we're doing are all together. And then I just, I just told myself, you know what? This is not the end of the world. If I have to go back home with my family, with my parents, I'll figure it out. I'll just figure it out. And I think it will be okay. And it did become okay. If you were in a relationship for 5 years, you have a company for 5 years. So it
Mhm.
was a lonely journey at first because I was not used to not having somebody. And even if, because for a while we were in a long distance. So even if, for example, um, I was not physically with that person, I was used to constantly texting that person or sending memes or messages or videos or pictures, right? It's a habit that you
Yeah.
develop for 5 years. So it was lonely at first, but then I think I remember my mom telling me, why don't you explore? Go on Tinder, go on whatever, just explore, date, you haven't been in the dating scene for 5 years. So that's what I did. And I remember the good thing about Tinder is that you can filter out the type of people that you want to meet, right?
Yeah.
So I think that led me to a moment which is fun for me to look back. It made me very specific on my preferences. Like I literally knew at that time not only what I wanted, but what I needed. So for example, I said, I needed somebody older than me that is more mature than me because I felt like in that relationship, I was the mature one. I was the one that trying to be rational. And I felt like I want somebody who could put me on my place, hold me accountable. I want somebody who could be my life partner in achieving my goals, building my dreams, reaching the ambitions that I have, because I'm a very ambitious person. So I want somebody more mature or older than me. And I also I think I was very specific in a sense that I do not want somebody familiar. It has to be a totally new person because I
Yeah.
want to totally new. So it kind of, when you get out of it, you realize what are the things that you need in your life. And eventually when you meet that person, it will just, I don't want to sound super romantic, but it will make sense that, oh, and there will always be trauma response, right? When you are now in a healthy relationship. I remember asking my husband, like, hey, my friends would have a night out with me. Can I go? And he's like, why the hell are you asking me? Oh, and then I was on the bar And I was calling him like, "Hey, you're right." And he's like, "Why are you calling me?" Just
Yes. Yeah.
and that's a trauma response because
Yeah.
you are so used to the experience that, oh, can I do this or can I, go with so and so? But yeah, it's a process and it's messy at first, but we'll get to
Yeah. One of the beautiful silver linings of coming out of these types of relationships, if you really use it for your growth, is being able to recognize, to your point of your non-negotiables, what
yeah,
you want and what you won't stand for. And sometimes we find, like, it's sort of the reverse engineering that of I can identify what I need in a relationship by knowing first what I absolutely won't tolerate. And I have a whole self-guided course that guides them through this exercise to find their values, their needs, their non-negotiables, their wants for that very reason. Because if we don't know, then we're going to take whatever comes. We
yep,
have to have the bar, right? We have to set our own bar, or I like to think of it as a backboard where we get to bounce people off of and be like, can they give me what I need?
yeah,
But if we don't have that, we're just collecting all the people like, oh, he'll validate me, he'll love me, he'll choose me. And that's not the right way to go into a relationship. And I love that you brought up your dating profile because when I was ready to create a profile, I had never created one before. I had always
yeah,
dated people that I knew through other friends or whatever. And so I was terrified of dating and creating a profile specifically. And I made it sort of a game for myself where I was like, I'm just going to be the most blunt that I can be and see what happens.
yeah,
So I literally in the top, I forget what the prompt was or something, but I was like, the only way that we'll get along is if you're in therapy or have a therapist. And the responses that I got from men were fascinating. Like fascinating in a way it's like, you're definitely not a healthy person. Or, they understood that boundary, they understood that need. And it opened up conversation of like, oh yeah, I've been in therapy 10 years, whatever it is.
yeah, exactly.
So being really clear and being able to filter out on the apps is one of the beautiful things about the apps
Yeah,
because meeting somebody else in person, it takes a little bit of weeding out to decide like if you're aligned or what you're looking for, if you're just looking for sex or if you're looking for a relationship. I don't know, the apps get a bad rap, I think, because there are a lot of bad things about the apps, a lot of frustrating things. But one of the good things is that you can set the parameter and then sort of suss out if people are being truthful about what they're saying about themselves. But um, yeah, the dating afterwards gets to be a fun experience if you are going into it with the confidence level of having healed some of your shit before and not just jumping into the next thing with this person will make it better, this person will be different. There's a lot of stuff in those relationships that we can take accountability for too, as the person in the receiving end of the abuse. And I don't mean that to say that we caused it, but there are dynamics that we play into with not having boundaries, not speaking our needs that you can take accountability for in order to grow and be better in your next relationship.
yeah. I think that's also very important, right? Like as you reflect about your previous relationships, you really have to be accountable for your part too. When I grew older, that's really when I realize the word of accountability. Accountability, not only, making sure that you hold others accountable, but you hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
And that's why after you get out of this narcissistic or abusive relationship, you get like that clear picture, right? Like you have your aha moment, or you see things much, much clearer now. And these are the things that in an ideal world, this is your starting point. Where
Yeah.
in an ideal world,
Yeah.
you should
Right.
have known your non-negotiables, you should have known your values, you should have known your needs, your preferences, and you should have, I think for me, I'm not gonna change anything in my past because I feel like that's made us who we are right
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
But it's really holding yourself also accountable of looking at the past without being too one-sided and also taking accountability of, okay, maybe in my next relationship I'll be more assertive or I'll be more vocal, and I'll also hold myself accountable and be conscious enough of being in the moment and say, am I saying no because I really don't want to, or just because I feel like he won't like it, so I will just say no,
Yep.
right? Because that's also one thing. That's part of the trauma response. Because i- again, if you're in a long term relationship, if in a being in a narcissistic and abusive relationship, there are statements that you have been saying for those years, habits that you've been doing for those years, and it's not going to go away easily because you're not in that relationship anymore. So,
Yeah.
how to be present, catching yourself in those situations.
Yeah. Taking that time in between the relationships to be able to find clarity around what happened, what it was, and then be able to heal the trauma or the shit that happened in that relationship. Because I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. It's like unhealed trauma is like walking on a minefield. And it's like any step, you just think you're going in one direction, right? Towards the next relationship. But you're stepping on all of these trauma wounds and they're exploding and you're reacting in the same ways and you don't know why. It's going to be much harder to get to the end goal of a healthy relationship if you're blowing yourself up all of the time. When we do the trauma work, we're able to discharge the feeling around what happened so that we can heal from it. It's not this like open, like gussing wound that we're just continuously poking. It's something that we can talk about that happened. That's a part of our story, but it's not activating in that same way of throwing me into my reaction or my triggered response.
Also, I think, there's also like cultural element of this, or not cultural in terms of race, but cultural in terms of family dynamics. So, for example, my family is non confrontational. We never talk openly. If there's a problem, it reaches a boiling point before it gets talked about.
Yeah.
Because I saw that's how my family operated. Whenever there is something that I disagree with in my relationship, I don't vocalize it.
Yeah.
And I think they always say, right, every successful relationship will say communication is the key. And it's easier said than done, obviously.
Sure.
But sometimes we should not fear difficult conversations, especially if those conversations needed to be had. If
Mhm.
it's, if it's, and also as what you said, there are levels into it, right? If it's a disagreement about the flavor of ice cream, then,
Yeah. Yeah.
then okay, we can give a pass on that probably.
Yep.
But if it's a disagreement, let's say, sometimes this is also one of the stories of my friends, disagreement on having kids.
Mhm.
um, there are men who, they want to have kids. And there are women that say, I don't necessarily not want kids, but I'm not ready, you know? And because of the fear of saying no to their partner, just because, again, there's lack of security, there's lack of strong foundation, they will just say yes, or they will drag out the conversation until it becomes even more detrimental. And again, just the stem of it, the root of it really is communication. You don't feel like mm, you don't feel like it's okay to say no, or it's okay to disagree. But in a healthy relationship, no's are okay, disagreements are okay, and it is solvable. It's not
Yes.
the end of the world.
Yeah, yeah, it's 2 people on the same team looking at the problem, right? Do you know who Stan Tatkin is? Are you
No.
familiar with him? He's an author, he's a psychologist, and he talks a lot he originated the pact theory and how to work with couples, and one of his books, I think it's Wired for Love, he talks about the couple bubble. And
Oh,
how in this bubble, the couple is in there together and they're moving about the world in this bubble and they're facing challenges together on the same team facing towards the issue. They're not fighting each other on the issue. But that level of connection and communication comes from feeling safe with your partner.
mm,
So safety comes as that foundation that we have to have in order to feel like we can bring something up that we're scared as shit to say, but that we know that we're not gonna be yelled at, we're not gonna be reprimanded, we're not gonna be judged. Our partner may not agree, but there's going to be a level of curiosity on them saying to you, tell me more. Tell me more about why you feel this way, or what your experience is.
Mm.
But if we don't have that safety, of course we are pulling away and bottling things up and just pretending like they're
Yeah.
not there until they explode. There's not a way to get around a feeling. We just build resentment until it pops out in different ways. But we need that safety. We need that ability to be like, I don't know how to say this. I'm really afraid to say this, but I want to have this conversation with you. And there be openness to that.
There's also one thing. I had my coaching session with my professional coach. It's a business coach, but we talk about this conversations, right? This difficult conversations. And she said the right conversation at the wrong time is the wrong conversation.
Yeah.
Right conversation at the wrong mindset is also the wrong conversation.
Mhm.
So, yes, we want to have those conversations, but make sure that both of you are open to the conversation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's like it seems so um like prescriptual. I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
word, but to like ask your partner if they're open for a conversation.
Yeah.
But that really does make a whole hell of a difference to say, my partner and I do this all the time, and we sometimes laugh as we're saying it because it sounds a little like, this is what the therapist said to do, you know? But it's like, I have something that I want to talk about. Do you have space? Is what we say to each other.
Like
And
that.
sometimes it's like, yeah, let me finish cooking dinner and then let's sit down where I can be more present with you. Or it's, no, I'm totally burnt from work and can we talk about it tomorrow? And either one of those answers is like, yeah, thank you for sharing where you're at, because this conversation is going to take a level of like emotional space. And if you're already burnt out, that's not a good way to go into that into that conversation. So, and to your point about like sleeping on it or not sleeping on it, I'm always an advocate of taking space until you are regulated enough to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because if you are up late at night just continuously yelling at each other, nothing is being solved anyway.
Nothing's
And the yelling is another side of a not so healthy relationship because it should be just a conversation. But sometimes we can't access just a conversation until we've both taken time to bring our nervous systems back into regulation, to be able to recognize this is why I was triggered and this is what I actually need, and the other person to say the same thing. And then we can find some resolve around that. But when you're both spun up, there's nothing there's nothing good happening in that dynamic.
exactly. Another thing too is so you know, even though we say that, we are getting healed from that relationship, right? It's always a work in progress. And even if you are in a healthy relationship, you have an amazing partner right now, there are still there is still work that needs to be done. So for example, one experience that I had with my husband just very recently, and this is where you identifying the right partner for who where you are at in your life is very important. Um Sometimes when I get frustrated or when I am disagreeing on something, there's one behavior that I know I have that up to this day I still have, which is to not talk. Like I get silent.
Yeah.
So for example, it could be we were in Hawaii for a vacation and I really want to snorkel. And I was like, I'm not leaving this island until I snorkel. It's a small thing. It's a seemingly small thing, but to me, I'm like, I really wanted to do it. I can't see myself not doing it. And I think we had a disagreement because first of all, he has a valid point. He can get easily burned and all that stuff, and and he doesn't like the activity as much as I do. And he noticed that I was not talking after that short conversation. And just because I don't want to insist anymore, and I feel like, why are you not picking up on the things that I'm saying that I want to do this, I can feel my emotions heightening up. And the reason why I don't want to talk is I don't want to raise my voice. Sometimes it's good, sometimes that's bad. Um, and he picked up on it and said, okay, let's talk about it. So you really want to do it. Okay. So where do you want to do it? Have you already seen some packages about it? Like, what are we going to do and all that stuff? Like, walk me through it so I can open my mind to it.
Yeah.
And I think when he told me that, that created such a safe space for me to say, okay, so I Googled this already. I have my checklist of
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also, I could have just brought that out for myself, but because you're two people, right? And not all the time, even though, yes, it's a much better relationship than before, not all the time you will have amazing time or amazing conversations. There will always be a little bit of friction, but you have to be conscious enough that you or your partner can pick it up and bring that out from you.
Yeah. And that comes from paying attention to your partner and being curious about them over time, right? It's like we learn our partner and their triggers and their responses. So sometimes we can, like your husband did, we can pull them out of something that they don't even know they're in yet. Oh, I recognize that your shoulders are up here and you're punching around the house. Like,
Yeah.
come here, let me give you a hug. What's going on? We are attuning to the partner in a way that maybe we've never been attuned to before. And especially if you are the one, the women listening, if you are the one always attuning to and
Yeah.
having that hypervigilance around, are you okay? What do you need? And giving yourself that way, it will feel different to be attuned to and to have somebody hold space and be like, I see, I see you're doing this thing and let's talk about it. That I remember the first experience of that happened to me with John, with my partner, and I just started bawling. I was like, "Oh my god, like this is what it feels like to be held. This is what it feels like to be cared for in a way that, like, I hadn't experienced in a relationship before." It was such a contrast to the toxic one specifically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel that you have, you're somebody understands, and that's okay. And if it's a negative feeling that you want to cry and all that, like that's okay. And I also remember the very first meeting that I had with my now husband, he said, you deserve more for your career and you can go such a long way compared to where you are now. And I remember like, oh my goodness, nobody really thought of my career or my aspirations in life before other than me.
Yeah.
And I think this is also where you thought you have your non-negotiables,
Yeah.
but then until somebody presented you with, no, this is your non-negotiable. That's why you have to pay attention. You have to be conscious, and it's okay to date people, meet, explore relationships, but just make sure that as you do those, you are fully in the moment because that's also a learning journey. It can be fun, yes, yes, but it's also a learning journey. And speaking of fun, one thing also that we do, my husband and I do when we know both of our emotions are could because there could be a lot of things, right? It could be at work, it could be something that not going according to your plan, or anything really, or family related or friends related. And we made it a habit that if one of us gets a little frustrated, irritated, angry, or hangry, which which I think in our generation is very common,
Yeah.
we make it fun. Like instead of it being so emotionally charged, very serious, we make it fun. Like for example, if I get butthurt over anything that is probably most of the time because I'm hangry, he's gonna be like, "How long?" And I'm like, "How long what?" And he's like, "How long till you be butthurt?" And when he asked me that question, then I snap out of it because
Yeah.
what you've said, you're not even realizing that you're
Yeah.
going down to this emotional rabbit hole.
Yes.
Somebody like just asked you that question. So it's things like that too, because it doesn't have to be serious. It could
Yeah.
be something that you can agree on as a couple. Like, next time somebody gets a feeling of this, why not let's have a word or let's have a magic word for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. The bringing a little bit of levity in the
Yeah.
relationship too. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we could talk all day long. But I want to know if there's any last I don't know, words of wisdom or advice for a woman who might be just exiting a relationship that she is realizing that is abusive, or trying to leave a relationship that's abusive, and maybe having this thought of, I'm never going to find that healthy person. Like, that person doesn't exist. My needs list is too long. I'm never going to be able to find this magical human. What would you say that to them on their journey?
It's very similar to, because in Filipino culture, I'm a Filipino, by the way, for those who don't
Yeah.
know. In Filipino culture, especially in the previous generations, they tend to marry early, probably early 20s, 20-year-old, 19 to 21, probably.
Wow.
Like, really out of college, they tend to marry young. And one of my friend's parents, because he also married young, and he, at first, he has some apprehension of like, maybe I'm going at it too soon, right? And then the parent said, you will never find a perfect person.
Mhm.
But what you can find is somebody that you can grow with. Even if that means you marry early, you marry late in life, as long as that person you can see yourself growing, then that's okay. That's all you need. And they may not tick all of the boxes that you want, but I think that's where also the non negotiable
Yeah.
come. You could say that I want blonde or I want brunettes,
Yep.
but if you look at the bigger picture, when life gives you the shit, will this person be by your side and
Yep.
say, it's okay, you know? And
Yep.
will this person be calm enough? Because if you are the type of person that's very reactive and can go really turbulent if things don't go your way, will this be complementary to who you are?
Mhm.
Because if both of us are firecrackers, then that's probably yeah. But somebody that you can go with. And
Yep.
I think lastly is give yourself some grace, because it's not going to be an easy journey. And even if you thought that you're already healed, you'll probably need a little more healing here and there. And
Yeah.
that's so just give yourself grace. And when you are now in a new relationship, give your new partner grace as well, in
Mm.
a sense that they're also understanding where you are and who you are. And that also takes time. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when we leave a negative experience, especially in a narcissistic or abusive relationship, we set the bar really high and expect our next relationship to be really perfect, because that's
Mhm.
what we hoped. And,
Yeah.
that's what we deserve. We deserve better, but it takes time and it takes two people to work these things together. So a
Yeah.
lot of praise.
Yeah. Lots of grace, lots of compassion, lots of therapy, lots of coaching. I'm glad you brought up the needs and the non-negotiables again, because that was the reason I created that self-guided course, was because so many of us choose people based on wants, right? I want the blonde, or I want the guy with the beard, or I want the guy that drives the whatever car, but none of the values align. So that course is called Find Yourself Again, and it walks you through like a filter system of how to identify your values, your needs, your non-negotiables, and then your wants, and how to put somebody through that filter system so that you're choosing people who are most aligned with those like big chunks of who you are. Because if you share values like self-growth, then likely you guys are both on the same page around learning skills to communicate, and being able to grow and better and evolve in the same direction. For example, there's lots of different values that you can have. That doesn't have to be one of them, but switching that thought process from, okay, how am I looking for the next person? S-
Mm.
The car and the beard are great, but if we align on all of our values, maybe that's less important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Thank you so much. I just loved hearing your story and your advice, and I know sharing takes courage, it takes vulnerability, so thank you for being willing to be with me today.
thank you so much, B. And as what I think I've already told you this, but just talking to you made me really think the paradigm of coaching. Because when you talk
Mm,
about coaching, right, I told you before that, oh, it could be very scientific in a way that you need to get licenses, you get your certifications. But
yeah,
you made me realize that when we talk about coaching, it's really about helping people, and
yeah,
you helping our fellow women, our fellow individuals who are leaving or who got out of these emotionally or physically abusive and narcissistic relationships, this is needed. And the space for conversations like this is needed because
Mm.
these are the things that we don't usually talk about in open. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. At the end of these episodes, I always pull an oracle card. Are you familiar with oracle cards?
No.
Okay. So they offer a lot of different messages. So what I'd like to do is have you help me choose a card on behalf of the listeners. So if you can just close your eyes for me, just take a deep breath into your body first. I'm just starting to shuffle the deck. So as we think about the women listening and what they need to hear today, just tell me when it feels right to stop the shuffle.
All right. Stop.
Okay. So we got balance and motion. And if you're not watching the video, it's a woman on a tightrope. So I'm going to read what the message is from the book here. Balance in motion requires you to make some subtle shifts. Balance isn't static. Micro changes create macro changes. Start small. Feel into those tiny movements that your unconscious is calling you to make. A little more of this, a little less of that. If you move too quickly, you'll just spaz out and overcorrect. The changes you wish to make are possible with slight adjustment. Stop searching for the perfect middle point and stay in easy motion. Soft focus, light attention. Be aware of your position and gently move towards the next right step.
I love that.
I love that too. Yeah. Also helping to combat the perfectionism, right?
Right.
Being able just to take a step here, take a step there, and then rebalance and then reassess. Yeah. So good. Ah,
Okay. Me.
I'm so happy that you were here today with Khryzza and I to hear more of her story. And I hope hearing how she moved from what she thought she could expect in relationships to what she knew she deserved in relationships gives you a little bit of hope and encouragement on what is possible for you too. So just to recap, we covered that unspoken reason that we justify away a verbal abuse or we don't recognize that it's happening. We talk about the vital aspects that you need in order to have a healthy relationship and what that even means, what to look for in your next relationship. And we talk about how Khryzza moved out of that trauma response that we think we're never going to be able to get over the hurdle of in order to start dating. And we also touched on a couple of resources for you. So I spoke about the Find Yourself Again self-guided course. And this course is perfect for you, or if you are in this place of just coming out of something, feeling like you don't know which way is up or down or left or right. You don't know who you are, what you believe in. You don't know how to trust yourself. This course is going to guide you very gently with pre-recorded videos and exercises to finding your values, your non-negotiables, your needs, your wants, so that you can have a most solid understanding of who you are before you start dating, and therefore have that bar set for yourself that we talked about in this episode. That is just vital. We have to know who we are, what we expect, what we will put up with, what we won't, or we will fall back into relationships where we are malleable, where we are like this amoeba thing that just sort of goes with whatever is being given to us. So this will help you have boundaries. This will help you be able to articulate and feel not guilty about the things that make you you. So the link is in the show notes. You can use the code podcast10 to get 10% off of that. That's my gift to any of my listeners. And I would love for you to reach out and let me know how that self-guided course goes for you. So as always, it's such a pleasure to be with you in these episodes. And until next time.